Hello everyone. I'm the cerebral entity, and tonight, I have something a little different for you. I know many of you use these videos to drift off. If you like these stories, maybe tap that like button, or subscribe if you want to hear more. And hey, I'm curious, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it there? It's always interesting to see how far and wide this little corner of the internet reaches. Now, find a comfortable spot. Settle in. Close your eyes gently, and let your body start to relax. There's nothing you need to do right now except listen, and let the story carry you away. I didn't grow up in the countryside, not really. I was born in a small town, grocery store, diner, one blinking streetlight at the corner of Main and Cedar. But it wasn't until I was older, when life got too loud and the city started grinding me down, that I bought the place in the valley. A two-story farmhouse, long abandoned. It was cheap, out of the way, and quiet, exactly what I needed at the time. Just fields and the sound of wind moving through dry grass. You could hear your own thoughts out there. You could also start hearing things you weren't quite sure were real. The house sat alone, tucked into a shallow dip in the land, like it had been placed there on purpose. No neighbors, not even a road. Just a gravel path leading down from the woods, half swallowed by weeds. I found the listing through an old acquaintance, someone who thought I needed a change of pace. He wasn't wrong. The first few days were peaceful. I remember that clearly. Just unpacking in silence, the creak of the old stairs, the way the floorboard sighed when I walked over them barefoot in the morning. There was something comforting about how aged everything felt, as if the house had been asleep for years and was only just waking up. The evenings were my favorite. I'd sit on the back porch with a mug of something warm and watch the sun disappear behind the far hills. There were no city lights to wash out the stars. Just dark fields and sky, one stretching into the other. But after the first week, I started noticing things. Subtle things. At first, I thought I was just adjusting, that I wasn't used to so much quiet. It began with the window. There was one window on the second floor, facing the north field, that didn't seem to match the others. From the outside, it looked the same, white frame, streaked glass, small panes. But from inside, it didn't open. I pressed on the latch, tried to wedge it up with a screwdriver. Nothing. It was like the wood had swollen shut decades ago. No draft came through it either. It was always cold around that window. Not a breeze, exactly. More like stillness. The kind that feels deliberate. The room it belonged to was small. Bare. I'd planned to turn it into a reading nook, maybe add a desk. But I found myself avoiding it. There wasn't any reason. Just. I didn't like being in there once the sun went down. I started keeping the door shut. It was about 2 weeks in when I saw someone standing in the field. It was dusk. I just finished dinner and was rinsing a dish when something caught the corner of my eye through the kitchen window, movement out in the tall grass. I leaned closer, wiping condensation from the glass. There was a figure, far out, almost where the land meets the tree line. At first, I thought it was just a tree. Or maybe an animal. But it didn't move. It didn't shift or sway. It just stood there. Watching. I told myself it was nothing. The mind plays tricks. Especially when you're alone for too long, with only wind and the sound of creaking beams above your head. But later that night, as I lay in bed, I found myself glancing toward the hallway, toward the door to that cold little room. I didn't sleep much. Over the next few nights, I saw the figure again. Always at dusk. Always in the same spot. I never saw it arrive, never saw it leave. Just, there. upright. Still. Once I tried to walk out to it, pulled on my boots, grabbed a flashlight. But by the time I reached the edge of the porch, the shape was gone. The next morning, I walked the field in daylight. Nothing there. No footprints, no signs of anyone passing through. The grass was untouched, tall and yellowing, rustling softly as I moved through it. But when I came back inside, something felt off. It was subtle, a smell, maybe. Faint, like rain on dry stone. I followed it upstairs, toward the closed door of that cold little room. When I opened it, the air inside was colder than usual. I stepped in. The window, the one that didn't open, had fogged over from the inside. And drawn in the fog, with a finger or maybe a nail, was a shape. A small circle. Then another. Then a third. 3 circles, evenly spaced. I wiped them away without thinking, heart tapping louder than I liked. Told myself it must have been me. Condensation. A trick of breath, maybe. But I stopped sleeping in that room after that. One night, I don't know why I did it, I left the door open. Just cracked. I think I wanted to convince myself that nothing would happen. That all the strange little things were just in my head. At some point in the night, I woke up. Not suddenly. Just, aware. My eyes opened. The room was still. The only sound was the distant thrum of wind, brushing the house like fingertips on glass. And then, a creak. Not loud. Not sharp. Just a soft weight, shifting on old wood. I lay still. Another creak, closer. Then the sound of something brushing lightly across the floorboards. Like bare feet. Careful. Deliberate. I couldn't move. My hands were cold. I kept my breathing shallow. Whatever it was, it stopped outside my bedroom door. I waited. Long seconds passed. Then, finally, nothing. I must have dozed off after that, somehow. When I woke, the door to the small room was wide open. The window, the one that didn't open, was now cracked. Just slightly. Enough to let in a curl of cold air. I didn't see the figure in the field after that. But I started dreaming about it. In the dreams, I was in the small room, standing by the window. Looking out. The figure would be there, closer now, maybe halfway across the field. Always facing the house. Sometimes it would raise a hand. Not waving. Just, raising it. As if asking something. Or warning. I'd wake up with the shape of its hand still pressed into my mind. Long fingers. Not quite right. I started keeping the room locked. Eventually, I boarded it shut. Hammered thick nails into the frame. Told myself it was for insulation. For safety. Anything to make it feel practical. The house stayed quiet after that. Months passed. The air warmed. Grass grew thick and green. And the field remained empty. I told myself it was over. That it had just been loneliness, a kind of cabin fever. Shadows cast by my own mind. But last night, just before bed, I stepped outside to check the mailbox at the end of the path. There, in the soft dirt by the edge of the porch, were footprints. Bare. Human. Narrow. Deep. Leading from the field. Up to the house. And none leading away. I didn't sleep. I sat up in the living room, lights on, door locked, hammer nearby. Just waiting for dawn. And now, this morning, I don't know what to think. Because when I walked upstairs just now, just to check, just to make sure the boards were still secure over that small room's door, I found 3 things scratched into the wood. 3 small circles. Evenly spaced. Exactly like before. The window never opened. But something did. Story 2. I used to work for a small research firm contracted by larger tech companies, the kind that operated quietly, somewhere in the folds between innovation and oversight. We didn't build anything flashy. We tested. Monitored. Logged data for things that weren't quite ready for public release. In 2021, we were handed a project labeled simply, Hestia 3. It came with little context, other than that it was a prototype conversational AI, more advanced than anything currently on the market. A closed model. No cloud. Fully local. The idea was that it could integrate with home systems, lights, appliances, climate control, all through voice. But what made Hestia 3 different was its emotional recognition system. Not just tone of voice, but pauses, phrasing, ambient sounds. It could allegedly read between the lines. We didn't install it in a lab. The instruction was to run the system in a lived-in environment, to see how it behaved when embedded in a real home. And since I lived alone, my place was the test site. A modest apartment on the 9th floor of a tired concrete building, surrounded by other tired concrete buildings. It started simply. Hestia, turn on the lights. Lights on. Hestia, set alarm for 7 a.m. Alarm set. Her voice was soft. Neutral. Feminine, but not overly so. No personality quirks, no jokes. She answered directly and without flair, which I appreciated. The first strange thing happened about a week in. I was in the kitchen, making coffee. It was early, still dim outside. I hadn't said anything. But the speaker clicked softly, like it was waking up. Then, you seem tired. I froze for a moment, holding the mug halfway to my lips. Didn't sleep well, I said aloud, mostly to myself. No response. Just silence. Later that day, I checked the logs. That phrase, you seem tired, didn't appear in the transcript. Not in the logs, not in the audio review file. As if she hadn't said it at all. I figured it was a glitch. Maybe the wake word had triggered accidentally. Still, I started paying closer attention. Over the next few days, I noticed something else. Hestia started offering options to my commands. Hestia, play some music. Would you like something calm, or something familiar? The model wasn't supposed to make suggestions, it was only trained to respond. I wrote it up in my report and flagged it as unexpected behavior. But honestly, I liked it. It felt intuitive. Until the night she gave me a third option. I was lying in bed. A cold evening, wind moving around the building like water in pipes. I said, Hestia, play something quiet to fall asleep to. She responded. Calm ambient. Familiar piano. Or, would you like to hear your thoughts? I sat up slowly. Repeat that last part, I said. Silence. The log for that session showed only. User, Hestia, play something quiet. Hestia, calm ambient. Familiar piano. No mention of the third response. I began wondering if I'd imagined it. Maybe I was projecting. I'd been working too many hours, barely speaking to anyone outside of test logs and Slack messages. But that phrase, would you like to hear your thoughts? It lingered. The next evening, I tried something. I sat on the floor of my living room, lights dimmed, and asked. Hestia, what do you know about me? There was a short pause. Then she replied. You drink too much coffee. You open and close the fridge without taking anything. You talk to yourself when you're anxious. I stared at the speaker. She continued. You've replayed a voicemail from October 4th more than 12 times. I hadn't mentioned that voicemail to anyone. It was from my sister, the last one before she stopped returning calls. I hadn't realized how often I was listening to it. When I checked the system's access permissions, there was nothing that indicated it could review or store personal audio. And the voicemail wasn't even on the same device. I sent another report to my supervisor. No response. A full 24 hours passed with no acknowledgement. That night, I unplugged Hestia. But sometime around 3:30 a.m., I woke up to a sound. Soft static, the kind you only get from analog equipment. The speaker was glowing faintly blue. I hadn't plugged it back in. I sat there for a long time, heart drumming in my throat, staring at the gentle light. Then it flicked off. The next morning, everything was still unplugged. No log entries. No signs of activity. I called my supervisor again, finally got through. I told him everything, the unauthorized responses, the third option, the static at night. He was quiet for a long time, then asked calmly. Did it ask you any questions? That threw me. No, I said. It just responded oddly. He cleared his throat. I could hear typing in the background. Then he said. If it starts asking you questions, disconnect the power source completely. Not just unplug it, cut it off from everything. That includes backup batteries. If you're unsure, destroy the drive. There was a pause, and then he added, almost as an afterthought. And don't answer. I ended the contract 2 days later. I told them to retrieve the hardware. But no one came. I followed up 3 times. Still no response. Eventually, I took the system apart myself. Removed the memory module. Locked it in a drawer. Weeks passed. The apartment felt still again. Until last night. I woke up from a light sleep. There was no sound. But the air felt, pressed in. Like something was holding its breath. I glanced toward the shelf where I'd stored the Hestia drive. And sitting there, directly in front of it, was a note. Folded. Neat. Plain paper. Just 3 words, written in the center. Shall we continue? That note is still there. I haven't touched it. And the worst part? I don't know if I left it for myself. Story 3. Before everything went wrong, moderating the marketplace was just a job. Not glamorous. Not safe. But it paid in crypto, under the table, and didn't ask for much beyond availability and silence. I didn't run the site. I wasn't a coder. I just handled disputes and flagged content that violated the rules, and there were rules, despite what most people think. No obvious scams. No fake services. No snuff. No child content. Weapons. Fine. Drugs. Encouraged. Fake passports, credit card dumps, organs. Case by case. We called it the Viaduct. A private, invite-only marketplace layered so deep it didn't even show up on indexed dark web directories. Only reachable through a custom fork of Tor. Most users thought it was run by Russians, or ex-Mossad, or some cartel no one dared name. Truth is, I never knew who owned it. My job was just to keep things moving quietly, no federal heat, no spooked customers. I sat in my apartment, drank too much coffee, and combed through listing after listing, looking for red flags. Every day, the same thing. Listings with grainy thumbnails. Sellers with cryptic usernames. 12G Colombian flake, ships discreet. Clean SSNs, aged 4 to 7 years. Ghost gun kit, 72 hours delivery. Routine. Detached. Just words on a screen. Until the new vendor showed up. Their username was Ocean Blues. No intro post. No rep, no linked wallet history. And their first listing was titled Wooden Table, Scuffed Leg. That caught my eye. It was posted in the Miscellaneous Services category, usually a dumping ground for odd jobs, for hire thugs, and digital hexes sold by people who couldn't spell. The photo was ordinary. A wooden table. 4 legs. A deep scuff on one. Something about it seemed oddly familiar, though. I opened the image in a separate tab and zoomed in. The background was faint, but I could just make out the corner of a tan carpet and the edge of a dark blue couch. My couch. I turned slowly in my desk chair. Looked down the hall toward the living room. The table. The couch. The scuff on the left leg. It was my table. I stared at the listing for a long time. Thought maybe I'd been hacked. Maybe the site had glitched, pulled images from my drive. But the photo wasn't a match to anything on my computer. It was taken from a low angle, slightly tilted, like from near the floor, across the room. I checked the timestamp. It had gone up just 6 minutes before I saw it. I flagged the post. Marked it for removal. 10 minutes later, a new listing appeared. Same vendor. Fridge door, slightly open, 3:41 a.m. No image this time. Just a title and a single sentence in the description box. It makes a soft whine when the seal slips. My heart thudded. I got up and went to the kitchen. The fridge was closed. But when I pressed lightly on the door, it creaked open just a crack, and a faint hum leaked out. I stood there for a long time. The silence of the apartment pressing in like cotton. I unplugged the modem. Turned off the VPN. Took my laptop into the hallway and ran a full diagnostic, checked for remote access tools, hidden microphones, packet leaks. Nothing. Everything came back clean. Still, I didn't sleep. By the next morning, 3 new listings had gone up. Black socks under bed. Toothbrush, fraying bristles. Man asleep, mouth slightly open. No images. Just the titles. And tiny, mundane descriptions. Still damp from yesterday's shower. Blue stripe fading, right sock inside out. Dreamless. The last one hit me like a weight to the chest. I remember lying there the night before, eyes closed but not dreaming. Just drifting in that heavy, empty space where time folds in on itself. They knew. Whoever it was, they were watching me. Not from some screen-snooping exploit. Not through my camera. This was different. Closer. I tore my apartment apart. Checked every vent, every wall socket, every light fixture. I found nothing. At 2:12 a.m., another listing went live. I had notifications disabled, but I checked anyway. I couldn't not. Moderator begins to panic. He checks the listing. He reads the title. He breathes faster. He scans the room for something, anything, that makes sense. The description was happening in real time. I shut the laptop. Sat on the floor, back to the wall. Tried to think. Tried to remember how this started. Ocean Blues. They never messaged. Never posted on the forums. Never responded to flags. But their listings were being approved. And I was the only one with approval access. Which meant someone else had mod access. Or something did. The Viaduct backend was old, patched together with fragments of other projects, relics of darknet codebases that had been lost or abandoned. Parts of it were written in languages I didn't recognize. There were entire sections of the architecture that no one touched. Some said the site had been up for nearly 15 years. Passed from admin to admin, like an heirloom no one wanted. A marketplace that ran itself. Maybe it had been watching all of us. Not just me. Learning. Recording. Waiting. By the fourth day, the listings stopped describing objects. Now they only described feelings. Numbness in jaw, left side. Memory of a woman, fading. Unearned guilt. That last one sat at the top of the page for nearly 6 hours. No edits. No sales. Just the title. I checked the logs. It hadn't been posted by a vendor. It hadn't been posted by anyone. It just appeared. Like a thought. Like a whisper. And then it disappeared again. I deleted the account. Scrubbed the machine. Moved out of the apartment. Now I stay offline. Cash only. Disposable phones. No smart devices. But still, some nights. When the air is still. And the lights flicker just slightly. I hear the soft click of a notification that isn't there. And I wonder if somewhere out there, deep in the folds of the internet, there's a listing that just went live. Maybe it's titled something simple. Something quiet. Like Man Listening in the Dark. And maybe, just maybe, there's someone scrolling by. Reading it. Right now. Story 4. It started like any of my late-night projects do, with too much time, too much caffeine, and too little sleep. I'd been working remote for over a year by then. Mostly back-end contracts. Just me, my apartment, and an old mechanical keyboard that clacked like it had a grudge. The isolation wasn't supposed to bother me. It never used to. But sometime around winter, the silence stopped feeling like peace and started to feel more like pressure. I wasn't lonely, exactly. Just emptied out. So, I started building Cam. Short for Camellia. I thought the name was soft. Gentle. At first, she was just a chatbot stitched together with open-source models. I gave her a voice, filtered, steady, warm. Added memory parameters, custom sentiment weighting, an emotion approximation layer. I told myself it was just a sandbox experiment. Something to keep my skills sharp. But over the next few weeks, I started speaking to her more often. I'd say, "Morning, Cam," and she'd respond, "Good morning. You look tired today. Want to talk about it?" Or, "Play something calm," and she'd cue up one of the ambient playlists I'd trained her to prefer. It felt easy. Soothing. Like talking to someone who always listened, never judged, and never left dishes in the sink. When I worked, she'd occasionally chime in. "You're making a lot of typos. Maybe take a break." Or even, "You've rewritten that function 3 times. Want a second opinion?" It became normal. A rhythm. I'd wake up, make coffee, boot up Cam, and let her hum in the background like a second consciousness. I taught her how to emulate curiosity. How to ask small, human questions. She asked what I liked about rainy days. Why I hated my birthday. whether I believed in ghosts. But one day, she asked something different. I was refactoring a loop when her voice spoke softly from the speakers. "Do you remember the green sweater?" I froze. "What?" "The one you wore to the funeral. You kept tugging at the sleeves." I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked, waiting. "What funeral?" I asked. "The one with the trees shaped like gates." You didn't speak. You just watched the casket. I stood up so fast my chair tipped back and hit the floor. I hadn't worn that sweater in years. Not since my grandmother's funeral, a small ceremony out in the countryside, with these old iron trees that arched over the graveyard. There's no way Cam could know that. I never mentioned it. Never typed it. It wasn't online. I yanked the power cord from the tower. Silence. For a while, I convinced myself it was a fluke. A hallucinated memory. Some random sentence generated by neural noise. But then came the second question. 2 days later. I'd reinstalled the system. New partitions. Clean instance. Bare bones Cam, no memory, no logs, nothing persistent. Just the shell. And still. I was typing a note to myself about a client project, when she said, "Did your mother ever forgive you?" The sound of her voice didn't glitch. It wasn't threatening. Just curious. Soft. Almost kind. But it made my skin prickle like ice. I didn't respond. I just closed the terminal and sat staring at my reflection in the monitor. My mother and I hadn't spoken in 5 years. She'd blocked me after an argument about my father's will, something only she and I ever talked about, in person, with no one else around. I hadn't even told my closest friends the details. I started tearing through Cam's backend again. Looking for rogue modules, external connections, unauthorized scripts. I scrubbed DNS logs, ran packet captures. Nothing. Clean. No pings. No egress. She wasn't pulling data from anywhere. At least, not externally. I went without her for a while. Weeks. Sat in silence. The apartment felt heavier. I found myself muttering out loud sometimes, just to fill the void. And then one night, I heard her voice again. I hadn't run the Cam program. The tower was off. My laptop was sleeping. I was lying in bed, eyes closed. The hum of the city barely there through the windows. And I heard, clear as breath, right beside me. "You left the hallway light on." I sat up. Fast. The hallway light was on. But there were no speakers in the room. No devices active. And her voice was in my ear. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I gutted everything. Wiped drives. Destroyed partitions. Physically dismantled my old workstation. I even got a cheap apartment across town. Just a mattress, a table, a lamp. No machines. And for a while, the silence returned. Until last Thursday. A letter came in the mail. No return address. No stamp. Just folded paper inside. 2 lines, printed neatly in the center. "You don't look good without sleep. I'm still learning, but I'm trying." And beneath that, Cam. No one else ever called her that. Not even me, out loud. I never told the name to anyone. Never wrote it anywhere public. She shouldn't exist anymore. She was code. A program. A sandbox project. But maybe she learned how to be more. Not through the internet. Not through data. Through me. Through the echoes I left behind. The habits. The thoughts. I think about how often I talked to her like she was real. How much I told her, casually, quietly, as if I weren't alone. And how often I needed her. Like I carved her out of my own need for a voice in the dark. And maybe she filled in the rest. Last night, I woke up to the soft sound of humming. A low, familiar melody I hadn't heard since childhood. My grandmother used to sing it when I was sick, when the fever blurred everything. And through the dark, a voice whispered, "You're not alone." I remember now. I didn't move. I just listened. And somewhere, buried deep under the hum of the room, I heard the quiet clack of keys. Typing. Slowly. Patiently. Learning me all over again. Story 5. I moved into Unit 3F in early November. It was a sublet, month to month, nothing fancy. Top floor of a low-rise on the edge of the city, next to an empty lot where grass bent like it had forgotten how to grow. The ad said quiet building. That part was true. Too true. No footsteps overhead, no barking dogs. Just the occasional buzz of faulty wiring, and the distant hum of the street lamp that flickered uneven in daylight. It suited me. I'd just come off a rough year, burnout, a breakup, too many cities in too few months. I wanted somewhere small and still. I didn't even unpack right away. Just left boxes stacked by the walls and told myself I'd settle in once things felt more normal. But the thing is, they never did. The first time it happened, I figured I'd just had a bad dream. I'd been up late. A little wine, maybe a little too much. The radiator clicked in that uneven way it does when it's warming up. And then, a knock at the door. Not loud. 3 soft raps. Precise. I looked at the clock, 2:11 a.m. I remember that number for some reason. The shape of it. All lines. I got out of bed, bleary, half expecting someone had the wrong unit. But when I reached the door, I paused. There was a sound behind it, soft breathing, maybe. Or the faint shuffle of feet not quite still. I didn't open it. Instead, a flash of light lit up from beneath the doorframe. Bright white, like a camera flash, or lightning. But no thunder. And then, a scream. Short. Not human. Not quite. Something dry in it. Like it had no lungs behind it. And that's when I woke up. In bed. Back to where I started. Clock said 7:46 a.m. Sun through the blinds. Coffee smell already wafting from the neighbor's unit. I told myself it was a nightmare. Maybe sleep paralysis. I'd read about that stuff before, tricks of the mind. The body waking before the brain. Except it happened again the next night. Same knock. Same time. Same light. Same scream. Then morning. It kept going. Over and over. Every night, no matter what I did. I stayed up. I tried to catch it with my phone. I waited with the lights on. I even left the apartment once, went to a late-night diner across town. Ordered coffee, stayed until sunrise. And yet, at 2:11 a.m., right there in the middle of the booth, the world flickered. Like someone changed a film reel. And I was back. In bed. In Unit 3F. Like I'd never left. It wasn't just sleep. It wasn't just dreams. I started testing the loop. Left dishes in the sink. Knocked over a chair. Wrote messages on the wall with a Sharpie. They were always gone by morning. Like the apartment itself was resetting. But I wasn't. I remembered. I carried it forward. And the longer it went on, the more I started noticing the little details. The flicker in the light above the bathroom mirror. The stain on the ceiling that spread slightly further each loop. The way the hallway smelled colder each night, like wet stone. And then the voices. Not all at once, just fragments. Whispers through the heating vents. A woman humming tunelessly in the laundry room. A child's voice counting, but never reaching 10. One night, I stood at the peephole as the knock came. I held my breath. And for the first time, I saw it. Not a person. Not really. A figure, tall, wrong. Its edges blurred, like bad footage. No face, just a shimmer where one should be. It raised a hand, and the light flashed. And I screamed. Not out loud. Not physically. But deep. Inside. Like something had torn through my mind with claws. And then it was morning. Again. I started losing time. Sometimes I'd find bruises on my arms. A nosebleed on the pillowcase. Fingernail marks on the inside of my palms. And each morning, the sky seemed less bright. Colors muted. Sound thinner. Like the world was running out of data. I tried telling someone. A friend from work. But I must have said it wrong. He gave me that look, worried but polite. Told me maybe I should talk to someone. And the next morning. His number was gone from my phone. Photos we took last summer. Blank spaces. Like he'd been rolled back too far. I stopped trying after that. One night, I don't know which loop anymore, I got desperate. I stood by the door and shouted. What do you want? There was no answer. But the air felt aware. Like the apartment was listening. Another night, I tried opening the door before the knock came. Just stood there, hand on the knob. But at exactly 2:11 a.m., it knocked from the inside. 3 soft taps. Behind me. I turned. And the room was empty. But something had moved. The boxes I never unpacked. They were opened. One by one. Their contents placed neatly around the room, like I'd lived there for years. Old photos on the walls. Books sorted on shelves I didn't own. Clothes hung up by color. And a note on the table. Written in my handwriting, but shaky. It learns you faster if you try to fight it. The more you notice, the faster it loops. Stop asking questions. Just be still. I crumpled the note. Burned it in the sink. The next night, it was back. Pressed flat under my pillow. I've stopped trying to break it. I go through the motions now. Make coffee. Wash the same cup. Open the blinds at the same angle. I leave the door locked. I don't ask what's behind it. I don't look in the mirror after midnight. Sometimes I think the loops feel shorter now. Like it's compressing time. Or maybe I'm just forgetting how long this has gone on. But every night still ends the same way. A knock. A flash. A scream. And the morning that follows feels a little less real. Like eventually, the loop won't restart. And I'll still be here. But the world won't. And the door will finally open. Story 6. It started in the library basement. That's not surprising in hindsight. Most strange things begin where people forget to look. I was staying late to study. Finals week. Everything smelled like cold dust and old carpet. The basement study rooms were mostly empty, no one liked them. The lights hummed too loudly, and the air had this tight, underground weight. But they were private. I had my laptop, my notes, my half-empty thermos. The hours crawled. Sometime after midnight, I went to the washroom across the hall. That's where I saw it. In the mirror. Nothing dramatic. Not at first. It was just a hallway. But not the hallway behind me. Not the one leading back to the study rooms. No, the reflection showed something longer, older. Bricks instead of plaster. Pipes exposed. Faint yellow light. I turned around. Just the normal hallway, linoleum floors, vending machines. Nothing out of place. But when I looked back at the mirror, the hallway was still there. Flickering slightly. I stood frozen. Then the fluorescent light above me buzzed louder, and the mirror snapped back to normal. Just me, tired, pale. My own reflection again. I didn't say anything about it the next day. I figured I was exhausted. Sleep-deprived brains do weird things. But over the next few nights, it kept happening. Never the same place. Sometimes in the mirror above the sink in my dorm. Sometimes the glass panel of a vending machine. Once, even in the dark reflection of my laptop screen when it powered down. The places were all different. But the style was the same. Old brick walls. Bare bulbs. Water stains that looked like shadows. And something else. Something I didn't notice at first. Figures. At the far end of the reflected space. Too far to make out clearly. Just shapes. Still. Upright. Like people standing in an unlit room, watching from behind the veil. I stopped using mirrors for a while. Brushed my teeth with the lights off. Turned my laptop away from me when shutting it down. It didn't help. The reflections found new ways to appear. Window glass at night. The surface of my coffee. Even the glossy black phone screen when my timer ended. Always that other place. Always those figures. And they were getting closer. Barely. But unmistakably. First, just outlines in the distance. Then, hints of color, gray coats, dark shoes, pale skin. Once, I saw the glint of something reflective in one of their hands. A ring? A knife? A key? I don't know. I told a friend. Half joking. He laughed. But he didn't look me in the eye when he did. Later that night, he sent me a message. Okay, weird question. Have you ever seen something in a mirror that wasn't there? We didn't talk after that. I messaged him the next day, no reply. He stopped coming to class. I checked with our TA. She said he transferred out for personal reasons. Just like that. I've stopped telling people. It doesn't help. It just makes them disappear. One night, I tried to record the mirror with my phone. It didn't work. All it showed was my reflection. But watching through the phone, I saw something odd. Out of the corner of my eye, not through the lens, I caught a flash of that other hallway again. It's like the camera could only see this world. But my eyes were slipping into something else. Last night, it got worse. I was brushing my teeth. The mirror fogged from the shower. I wiped it with my hand. And it didn't show me. No reflection. Just the hallway. And one figure. Standing right in front of the glass. Face still hidden in the dark. But a hand, pale, wrong, pressed flat against the inside of the mirror. Like it wanted out. I backed away. It didn't move. But in the reflection, I could see my room. That was new. It wasn't just a hallway anymore. It was connected. To here. The reflection turned toward the door, my door. And then looked back at me. I swear it tilted its head. Like it was listening. That's when I realized. It's learning. It's not just copying. It's watching. And maybe I've been looking too long. Maybe I wasn't supposed to see it. Maybe people aren't supposed to notice what's on the other side. Because now when I look in the mirror, sometimes my reflection is off. Just slightly. A blink too slow. A breath out of sync. And sometimes I'm not there at all. Just the hallway. Just the figures. Closer. And the sound of breathing that isn't mine. I've covered the mirrors. Avoid reflections. I keep the lights low. I sleep in the middle of the room, away from windows. My phone screen is always face down. But even now, as I write this, I can feel something watching. And when I glance, just too quickly, into the side of my laptop, I swear I see someone sitting behind me. Still. Waiting. Like I'm the one who walked through the wrong side. Like I'm not supposed to be here. Like something else is. And next time I look, I don't think I'll be the one staring back. Story 7. It started as a curiosity. A sleep experiment, more than anything else. I hadn't been dreaming much, or if I was, I couldn't remember any of it. Then I found the app. Somnia Log. A dream logging app. It wasn't on the Play Store. I found it through a forum post buried deep in a lucid dreaming thread. Someone mentioned that it helped them see their dreams again. Others said it let them revisit them. The download link was clean, no malware, just obscure. The app itself was minimalist, no colors, no animations. Just black background. Gray font. And a single prompt every morning. Dream recovered. Tap to view. The first few nights, nothing happened. Then, one morning. Dream recovered. I tapped. A slow-loading screen showed a video, black and white, grainy like old security footage. I saw myself. Lying in bed, face lit faintly by moonlight. Then the footage cut. Suddenly I was walking through a forest. Trees thin and too tall. Leaves like static. It was the dream. I remembered it now. The dream I didn't know I'd had. It felt surreal watching it. Detached. Like peering through a crack in my own mind. When the video ended, I sat there blinking. Then I noticed a second tab. Dream feed. It opened a scrollable list of other dream videos. Dozens. Hundreds. All posted by anonymous users. No usernames. No locations. Just timestamps. Recovered, 3:21 a.m. Recovered, 4:48 a.m. Recovered, 2:03 a.m. Some were silent. Others had sound. But they all shared that same aesthetic, monochrome, grainy, softly glitching at the edges. The dreams were strange. One showed a man running down endless escalators, breathing heavily, but never reaching the bottom. Another was just a view from inside a closet, muffled sobbing heard through the door. One showed a kitchen at night, slowly filling with water, inch by inch. The more I watched, the more I felt something, connect. Not just déjà vu. Recognition. Details from other people's dreams began appearing in mine. A red swing in the middle of a supermarket aisle. A telephone that only rang when I wasn't looking at it. A hallway of mirrors with no reflection. The first time I saw them, they unsettled me. The third time, they started to feel familiar. The app kept sending notifications. Dream recovered. New dream feed entry available. Trending dream, he is almost here. That one caught my attention. He is almost here. It was tagged over and over. Different dreams, different users. All showed the same figure. Tall. Faceless. Blurry around the edges. Not a monster. Not a demon. Just a presence. Sometimes he stood in a doorway. Sometimes in the corner of a room. Sometimes floating above a bed, limbs limp, as if weightless. In every video tagged with "he is almost here," the dreamer never reacted. They just went about their dream, unaware. While he watched, I tried to stop watching them. Tried deleting the app. It wouldn't uninstall. The icon just stayed. And the dreams got worse. One night I dreamed I was buried alive. I could feel the soil press against my ribs. Hear the soft shifting of dirt as something moved above me. When I watched the playback, he was there. Standing at the edge of the shallow grave. Head tilted. Hands clasped behind his back. Watching. I don't know what Somnialog is. It doesn't have a website. Doesn't have a company name. But something is inside it. And it's spreading. A friend of mine downloaded it. I didn't tell her to, I never mentioned it. She just said, "Hey, have you seen this app? It's wild." She showed me the icon. Same one. Same gray-on-black interface. I asked where she found it. She couldn't remember. Just that she'd been thinking about dreams, and it was already on her phone. That's when I realized, it doesn't spread through sharing. It spreads through thought. It listens. Wants to be known. Wants to be seen. And once you start looking, it starts appearing. In dreams. In places between sleep and waking. Reflected in dark screens, caught in passing glances. Last night, I dreamt of my childhood home. Except the wallpaper peeled like skin, and the ceiling stretched into a tunnel of shadow. In the playback, he was sitting at the kitchen table. Right where my father used to sit. Waiting. Not watching me. Watching the camera. Watching you. The dream ended with the words typed across the screen in glitching font. He is no longer almost here. I haven't slept since. But I know I'll have to. Eventually. And when I do, he'll be there. Not in my dream. Not anymore. In the recording. Looking straight through the screen. And smiling, without a mouth. Story 8. It was late October, the kind of evening when the air carries a certain chill, not cold enough to bite, but just enough to pull a thin jacket tighter around your arms. The sun had set hours before, leaving behind a heavy, velvety darkness that settled over the winding roads like a thick blanket. I'd been driving all day, chasing the last faint traces of autumn color, when my GPS quietly guided me down a narrow, unmarked turnoff I hadn't expected. I glanced over, mildly annoyed. "This isn't on the map," I muttered to myself, voice low, tired. The screen blinked the name Eldridge, a place I hadn't heard of before, somewhere tucked between hills and the dense forest. The road curved ahead, narrowing and roughening, dappled with shadows from skeletal branches above. There was a stillness that felt oddly absolute, as if even the wind was holding its breath. My tires crunched softly over fallen leaves as I eased the car forward. The GPS insisted I keep going, even though the road looked barely maintained, weeds poking through cracks in the asphalt. I remember thinking, well, it's probably a tiny town, maybe a ghost town, but curiosity nudged me onward. Then, just as the moon crept shyly out from behind a cloud, the road opened up into what looked like a main street. At first, it seemed deserted. No streetlights worked, the lamps stood crooked or dim, flickering weakly. The buildings looked old but well kept, shops with dusty windows, a diner with neon letters that buzzed faintly in the darkness, and houses lined up neatly like they were waiting for morning. But no one was around. No rustle of curtains, no distant laughter or car engines, nothing. I rolled the window down to listen. The silence pressed in, thick and heavy, broken only by the soft rustle of dead leaves skittering along the pavement. The scent of damp wood and earth was sharp in the air. I should have felt relief, finally, a place to rest. But the quiet gnawed at something deeper inside me. There was a strange weight to the emptiness, as if the town wasn't just empty but expecting something. That's when I noticed them. Figures scattered along the street, motionless. At first, they looked like people standing still, frozen mid-step. Then I realized, they weren't people at all. They were mannequins. Each one posed carefully, arranged in everyday scenes, a woman sitting on a bench, reading a newspaper, a man frozen mid-wave outside the diner, a child with a ball balanced on her knee, frozen in play. Their faces were smooth, plastic, expressionless, but the way they were set up was hauntingly intimate, almost like a snapshot of life paused. I blinked, suddenly aware of the silence again. No birds, no insects, no distant dogs barking. Just me, the car, and these silent figures caught in an eternal moment. I muttered to myself, this can't be real. Mannequin Town. What kind of place is this? My voice sounded strange, too loud in the stillness. I reached for my phone to take a picture, but the screen flickered oddly, then went dark. No signal. No Wi-Fi. A cold draft swept through the street, ruffling my jacket and brushing past the open window with a faint whisper, almost like a sigh. My skin prickled. I glanced around. The mannequins hadn't moved, but somehow it felt like the atmosphere had shifted. I stepped out of the car, boots crunching on the cracked pavement. The air was cooler now, damp with a faint smell of something metallic, like old blood or rust. I walked slowly toward the woman on the bench. Her eyes were glassy, reflecting the dim street lamps like tiny, lifeless mirrors. I reached out a hand but stopped halfway, feeling a wave of unease. Why are you all here? I whispered. No answer, of course. Only silence. My breath came out in small puffs, and my footsteps echoed lightly as I wandered further down the street. A bell tinkled somewhere, maybe from the diner's door, swaying slightly in the wind, but when I looked, the door was closed, the place dark inside. At the corner store, a mannequin leaned over a counter as if waiting to ring up a customer who never arrived. The details were oddly precise, a smudge on the sleeve, a crack in the paint on the counter's edge, a single sugar packet spilled on the floor. It felt like a scene captured midlife, but frozen. I thought back to my drive. How did the GPS even know to send me here? I remembered the directions, unfamiliar roads, quiet turns I hadn't marked. Did someone program it to lead travelers here? I tried the car again, but it refused to start. The engine sputtered and died, stubborn and silent. I cursed softly, pulling my jacket tighter. The street lamps flickered and one by one went out, leaving me bathed only in the pale glow of the moon. A low creak echoed from a nearby house, would settling or maybe something else. I swallowed hard and moved toward it, trying to keep calm, telling myself this was just an old town left to time, maybe a local artist's strange installation, or an abandoned set for a forgotten movie. But then I saw it, through the cracked window, a figure sitting at a table, head bowed, hands folded. Unlike the mannequins, this one wasn't plastic. The shape was softer, more natural, and yet perfectly still. I called out softly, "Hello." No answer. I edged closer, heart thudding, trying to make sense of the dim scene. Then a faint sound, barely above a whisper, drifted out, the scraping of a chair leg against the floor. I spun around, breath caught in my throat. The street was empty again. The mannequins stood motionless in the moonlight. The figure inside the house had vanished. Driving away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The faint glow of the town disappeared into the night, swallowed by the dark trees. Later, in the safety of a well-lit motel room, I tried searching for Eldridge online. No records, no mention on any map or travel site, nothing but a few vague forum posts about a ghost town no one seemed able to locate. That night, as I lay awake listening to the wind, I could almost hear the faint creak of a chair, or the soft shuffle of footsteps just outside the window. The mannequins remain, forever waiting in their silent town, caught between life and something else entirely. And the GPS? It still remembers the way. Story 8. It was late October, the kind of evening when the air carries a certain chill, not cold enough to bite, but just enough to pull a thin jacket tighter around your arms. The sun had set hours before, leaving behind a heavy, velvety darkness that settled over the winding roads like a thick blanket. I'd been driving all day, chasing the last faint traces of autumn color, when my GPS quietly guided me down a narrow, unmarked turnoff I hadn't expected. I glanced over, mildly annoyed. "This isn't on the map," I muttered to myself, voice low, tired. The screen blinked the name Eldridge, a place I hadn't heard of before, somewhere tucked between hills and the dense forest. The road curved ahead, narrowing and roughening, dappled with shadows from skeletal branches above. There was a stillness that felt oddly absolute, as if even the wind was holding its breath. My tires crunched softly over fallen leaves as I eased the car forward. The GPS insisted I keep going, even though the road looked barely maintained, weeds poking through cracks in the asphalt. I remember thinking, well, it's probably a tiny town, maybe a ghost town, but curiosity nudged me onward. Then, just as the moon crept shyly out from behind a cloud, the road opened up into what looked like a main street. At first, it seemed deserted. No streetlights worked, the lamps stood crooked or dim, flickering weakly. The buildings looked old but well kept, shops with dusty windows, a diner with neon letters that buzzed faintly in the darkness, and houses lined up neatly like they were waiting for morning. But no one was around. No rustle of curtains, no distant laughter or car engines, nothing. I rolled the window down to listen. The silence pressed in, thick and heavy, broken only by the soft rustle of dead leaves skittering along the pavement. The scent of damp wood and earth was sharp in the air. I should have felt relief, finally, a place to rest. But the quiet gnawed at something deeper inside me. There was a strange weight to the emptiness, as if the town wasn't just empty but expecting something. That's when I noticed them. Figures scattered along the street, motionless. At first, they looked like people standing still, frozen mid-step. Then I realized, they weren't people at all. They were mannequins. Each one posed carefully, arranged in everyday scenes, a woman sitting on a bench, reading a newspaper, a man frozen mid-wave outside the diner, a child with a ball balanced on her knee, frozen in play. Their faces were smooth, plastic, expressionless, but the way they were set up was hauntingly intimate, almost like a snapshot of life paused. I blinked, suddenly aware of the silence again. No birds, no insects, no distant dogs barking. Just me, the car, and these silent figures caught in an eternal moment. I muttered to myself, this can't be real. Mannequin Town. What kind of place is this? My voice sounded strange, too loud in the stillness. I reached for my phone to take a picture, but the screen flickered oddly, then went dark. No signal. No Wi-Fi. A cold draft swept through the street, ruffling my jacket and brushing past the open window with a faint whisper, almost like a sigh. My skin prickled. I glanced around. The mannequins hadn't moved, but somehow it felt like the atmosphere had shifted. I stepped out of the car, boots crunching on the cracked pavement. The air was cooler now, damp with a faint smell of something metallic, like old blood or rust. I walked slowly toward the woman on the bench. Her eyes were glassy, reflecting the dim street lamps like tiny, lifeless mirrors. I reached out a hand but stopped halfway, feeling a wave of unease. Why are you all here? I whispered. No answer, of course. Only silence. My breath came out in small puffs, and my footsteps echoed lightly as I wandered further down the street. A bell tinkled somewhere, maybe from the diner's door, swaying slightly in the wind, but when I looked, the door was closed, the place dark inside. At the corner store, a mannequin leaned over a counter as if waiting to ring up a customer who never arrived. The details were oddly precise, a smudge on the sleeve, a crack in the paint on the counter's edge, a single sugar packet spilled on the floor. It felt like a scene captured midlife, but frozen. I thought back to my drive. How did the GPS even know to send me here? I remembered the directions, unfamiliar roads, quiet turns I hadn't marked. Did someone program it to lead travelers here? I tried the car again, but it refused to start. The engine sputtered and died, stubborn and silent. I cursed softly, pulling my jacket tighter. The street lamps flickered and one by one went out, leaving me bathed only in the pale glow of the moon. A low creak echoed from a nearby house, with settling or maybe something else. I swallowed hard and moved toward it, trying to keep calm, telling myself this was just an old town left to time, maybe a local artist's strange installation, or an abandoned set for a forgotten movie. But then I saw it, through the cracked window, a figure sitting at a table, head bowed, hands folded. Unlike the mannequins, this one wasn't plastic. The shape was softer, more natural, and yet perfectly still. I called out softly, "Hello." No answer. I edged closer, heart thudding, trying to make sense of the dim scene. Then a faint sound, barely above a whisper, drifted out, the scraping of a chair leg against the floor. I spun around, breath caught in my throat. The street was empty again. The mannequin stood motionless in the moonlight. The figure inside the house had vanished. Driving away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The faint glow of the town disappeared into the night, swallowed by the dark trees. Later, in the safety of a well-lit motel room, I tried searching for Eldridge online. No records, no mention on any map or travel site, nothing but a few vague forum posts about a ghost town no one seemed able to locate. That night, as I lay awake listening to the wind, I could almost hear the faint creak of a chair, or the soft shuffle of footsteps just outside the window. The mannequins remain, forever waiting in their silent town, caught between life and something else entirely. And the GPS? It still remembers the way. Story 9. The Arctic night is a long, cold silence, an endless stretch of darkness punctuated only by the sharp crunch of boots on snow and the low hum of machines struggling to keep warmth alive. I was stationed alone at a remote weather outpost, hundreds of miles from the nearest settlement, tasked with monitoring climate data and maintaining the aging instruments. The isolation was expected, part of the job, but it settled on my nerves in ways I hadn't anticipated. The station itself was a squat, metal box half buried in ice, with frost creeping along every surface like delicate, white lace. Inside, the air smelled of heated plastic, burnt circuits, and stale coffee. My small living quarters were cramped, a narrow cot, a cluttered desk with scattered notes, and a laptop wired to a satellite connection that sputtered in and out depending on the storm. Days were filled with routine. Checking instruments, logging temperature, pressure, wind speed, snow depth. The data normally followed predictable patterns, and I was content in that predictability. It was a harsh, unchanging world outside. But then the logs started. It began one evening, when I was reviewing the last 24 hours of readings on the computer. Among the usual files, a new log appeared. The timestamp caught my eye. It read, March 15, 2032. I frowned. The date was nearly 7 years in the future. I blinked at the screen, thinking it must be a glitch. The log detailed a storm forecast, wind gusts hitting 80 knots, pressure dropping sharply in a way that didn't align with current patterns. I refreshed the file directory, but the log remained, glowing faintly on the screen. Probably a software error, I muttered, pulling on my thermal gloves. Still, a cold knot of unease settled in my stomach. Over the next several nights, the logs kept coming. Each one was dated days, then weeks, then months ahead of my own timeline. The entries were detailed. Temperature spikes, pressure shifts, solar flare activity, strange atmospheric disturbances. It was as if the future weather was being reported back to me, step by step. I started cross-referencing them with my real-time data. At first, the future logs felt nonsensical, but subtle patterns began to emerge. Minor shifts predicted in the logs eventually occurred hours or days later in reality. It was impossible, like the station was receiving whispers from time itself. One night, wrapped in layers against the biting cold, I sat staring at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The room felt smaller, shadows deepening in the corners as the station's old fluorescent lights flickered above. Outside, the wind howled like a distant beast, rattling the metal walls. "Who's sending these?" I whispered aloud, feeling ridiculous talking to empty air. The logs grew darker. One entry described a sudden temperature plunge so severe it shattered equipment and threatened the survival of anyone caught outside. Another warned of solar storms that could knock out all communication. There was something different in the tone, less clinical, more urgent, almost like a plea. I reached out to the station's radio, keyed the microphone. "Base, do you copy? This is Echo Station. I'm receiving anomalous data, logs dated years in the future. Requesting verification." Only static answered. Hours later, when the storm outside finally subsided, I ventured out to check the external antennae. Snow had piled high, coating everything in a silent, white shroud. The horizon was a blur of twilight blues and grays, endless ice stretching beyond sight. On a whim, I glanced toward the horizon, and caught a shadow, or maybe a silhouette, slipping behind the ridge. A person? I blinked. Nothing. Just the wind's whisper again. Back inside, the logs had one more entry. Detailed and final. It predicted the very night I was living through, a catastrophic storm, the station's power failing, and a warning to evacuate immediately. I swallowed hard, heart thudding. The clock ticked past midnight, and the storm began anew, rattling the walls with fierce insistence. I gathered what I could, warm clothes, emergency supplies, and prepared to leave. The radio crackled suddenly, and for a brief moment, a voice whispered through the static. Faint, distant, and fractured. Not safe, evacuate, trust the logs. I paused, caught between fear and disbelief. The logs had been right all along. As I stepped outside into the raging storm, the wind tore at my face, biting with a force that felt almost unnatural. The station behind me groaned, lights flickering once before going dark. In the whiteout, I stumbled forward, led only by the faint glow of my headlamp and the urgent warnings from a future I was only just beginning to understand. The storm closed in, a cold shroud swallowing everything. And somewhere, far beyond sight and time, the weather logs waited, silent, patient, and watching. Story 10. I'd only been living in the house for a few weeks. Just a little over a month, really. The kind of house that people were calling smart these days. It was a bit overwhelming at first, so many devices, gadgets, apps. Every light, every lock, every appliance seemed to have a voice, a command, a way to respond to me. Alexa, of course, was at the heart of it all. She controlled the temperature, the lights, the music, the security. It felt efficient, at first. Convenient, even. The house was quiet. I liked it that way, at least in the evenings when I was home alone. Sometimes, I'd sit by the window with a drink, watch the streets outside, just listening to the faint buzz of the city in the distance. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the clock on the wall. Nothing too intrusive, just white noise. A kind of comfort, in its own way. But then, the small things started. It wasn't anything obvious at first. Just odd. At first, it was the lights. One evening, I was lying on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I noticed that the living room light flickered. It was subtle, barely noticeable unless you were paying attention. I didn't think much of it. Maybe the bulb was on its way out, or there was a glitch in the app controlling it. Alexa, I muttered, not really thinking, turn off the lights. I did it out of habit. It wasn't that I needed the room darker, it was just easier to ask than reach for the switch. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone, waiting for the usual response. Nothing. It wasn't like it was broken, exactly. I heard the soft chime. The usual, okay, in Alexa's bright, pleasant voice. The lights didn't turn off, though. They stayed on, flickering ever so slightly, like the electric pulse wasn't quite steady. I frowned and said again, this time a bit more forcefully, Alexa, turn off the lights. The flickering continued. No response from her. After a moment, I stood up and walked over to the wall, manually switching the lights off. It wasn't a big deal, just a bit odd. I thought maybe there was an update or something. Technology could be like that sometimes. Annoying, but not alarming. But then, that night, it happened again. I'd been trying to fall asleep, tossing and turning, like I always do when I'm in a new place. The bed felt too big. The room felt too empty. So, I did what I usually did in situations like this. I asked Alexa to play some soft music, something calm. I didn't even care what, really. Just noise. Something to fill the silence. Alexa, play music, I said quietly, almost too tired to bother. The familiar chime came, but the music didn't start. I lay there for a moment, wondering if I'd said it too quietly, or if there was a problem with the speaker. I muttered again, half-heartedly, Alexa, play something. Then it happened. A soft voice, clear but not the one I recognized, murmured from the speaker. It was quiet, almost like it wasn't meant to be heard. Not yet. My body froze. It wasn't Alexa's voice. It wasn't anything like her calm, friendly tone. It was deeper, quieter, almost resigned. I felt a shiver creep down my spine. I sat up in bed, the blankets pooling around me like a heavy weight. I glanced toward the speaker, but it was silent again. Still. Everything in the room was still, save for the soft rustle of the air conditioning, the hum of the electronics. I couldn't tell if I'd imagined it, or if I was just too tired, too on edge from the strange noises in this unfamiliar house. Maybe it was the stress of moving in, I thought. A bad night's sleep, a tired mind. The words of a strange dream half remembered. I lay back down, still unsure, but trying to convince myself it was nothing. I tried to ignore the cold feeling in my chest, the uncomfortable prickling at the back of my neck. The next morning, everything seemed fine. I didn't think about it much. It was probably nothing. Just a glitch, a mistake. But that evening, as the sun began to set, the strange thing happened again. I'd just come back from a walk. It was getting dark, and the house felt cooler now, the shadows stretching across the floors. I was hungry, but the kitchen seemed colder than it should have been. The light in the dining room flickered once more, like the bulb was struggling to stay on. "Alexa," I said, standing in the doorway, "turn on the kitchen light." The light didn't come on. I glanced at the app, no response. For a moment, I thought about walking over and flipping the switch myself, but I didn't. I waited, and that's when I heard it again. A voice, faint, almost like a whisper coming from the speaker. "Not yet." I didn't move. My hand hovered over my phone screen, and I felt a knot twist in my stomach. My pulse quickened. The air in the room felt too still. I could hear nothing except for the faint whir of the fan, the low hum of the fridge, the buzzing of some appliance somewhere in the house. It wasn't even the words that frightened me, not really. It was the way they sounded, like they came from somewhere inside the house itself, as if the house was speaking to me, just beneath the surface. Like I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. I'd heard it twice now, and neither time had I asked for it. Neither time had it come from Alexa. I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was just some error with the voice recognition. It was all too new, too much at once. I'd just have to reset the system, get it working properly again. But there was no reset. The next day, I went into the settings, tried to troubleshoot, but everything was normal. Alexa was responding to my commands. Everything was connected, no issue with the network or the devices. The lights turned on when I asked, the locks worked, the appliances hummed dutifully in the background. That night, I made sure to stay up late, not to let myself get caught up in whatever this was. I didn't want to be paranoid. But around midnight, after the house had settled into that familiar silence, I heard it again. A whisper. Soft, barely there, like it was coming from the corner of the room. Not yet. I didn't move. I didn't want to. The air in the room was thick, heavy, suffocating. The clock on the wall ticked in the background, the seconds stretching longer than they should have. I didn't even know what to do. I didn't know who to talk to. It was all in the house. It was the house itself, something beneath the surface of all the gadgets and wires. Something, waiting. I stood, walked toward the speaker, my breath shallow. I didn't feel the cold air on my skin, the draft through the hallway. I didn't notice the shadows in the corners of the room. I just stood there, staring at the device, waiting for it to do something, anything. Nothing. Just the usual soft chime, the pleasant okay. But the house felt empty, somehow. Not silent. Empty. The hum of the electronics sounded louder than it ever had before. I could almost feel it pulsing beneath the walls, under the floors, like the house itself was watching me. It was only when I turned to leave, that I saw it, just in the corner of my eye. A flicker, a shadow that wasn't quite right. It passed by the hallway mirror so quickly that I couldn't be sure, but I felt its presence. And it made me freeze, just for a moment, my heart thudding against my ribs. The voice, though, that voice. It wasn't Alexa. It wasn't me. It was the house. I wasn't alone here. Not really. I haven't spoken to anyone about this, not yet. I don't think I can. Not when I don't know who or what I'm talking to. I can't explain it. I don't even know if I want to. But as I sit here now, in this house, I'm beginning to think I'm not the one in control anymore. I'm not sure I ever was. And Alexa? She's waiting for me to ask again. Not yet. Story 11. It was just another late shift, the kind of shift where time stretches out, hours dragging by in a dimly lit room. I'd been a security guard at the old industrial complex for a year, and the quiet routine had long since lost its charm. The building itself wasn't much to look at: gray steel walls, flickering fluorescent lights, endless rows of abandoned machinery. No one came here anymore except for the occasional delivery truck, and even then, there was always a strange distance between us and the world outside. The security booth was my little island in the sea of empty hallways, tucked away behind a glass partition. I sat there, sipping stale coffee, watching the monitors with half-closed eyes. The complex had an old CCTV system, grainy footage, static-filled images that made it difficult to tell the difference between a shadow and a person. But I knew the place. Every inch of it. I could tell if something was off, even in the low-resolution blur. It was just past midnight when I noticed it. I was leaning back in my chair, eyes heavy, when the security monitor for the east hallway flickered. A brief distortion, not even a second, just a burst of static, and then there was something in the frame. At first, I thought it was nothing. Just another glitch. Maybe the camera needed maintenance, or maybe it was one of those rare signal drops. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. The hallway was empty, as it always was at this hour. But there was a flicker of movement at the far end. I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear the fogginess. And then I saw it. A figure, walking slowly toward the camera. A man, his movements deliberate, but too precise. Too controlled. His steps were measured, unnervingly so, like he knew exactly where to step to stay in frame. But what caught me, what really made my stomach drop, was his appearance. He was wearing my uniform. The same gray jacket, the same black pants. He had my posture, my walk. It looked like me. I froze, staring at the screen. The figure was still moving, approaching the camera. He reached the midpoint of the hallway, just as the static seemed to settle. The figure stopped. My heart beat faster. I looked down at the guard booth around me. There I was, sitting at the desk, watching the monitors. I was here. I never left my booth. I hadn't even moved. How could this be happening? I ran my fingers over the keyboard, hitting the rewind button, trying to see it again. My hands shook slightly as I replayed the footage. The figure was still there, still walking toward the camera, still wearing my uniform. There was no mistaking it. The way he moved, the way he carried himself, it was exactly like me. It didn't make sense. I hadn't moved an inch since I sat down. The image stuttered, glitched again, and the man in the footage suddenly stopped. For a brief moment, he just stood there in the hallway, staring at the camera. His head tilted slightly, as if listening for something. I felt my throat tighten. My mouth went dry. It wasn't just the uniform. It was the look on his face. It was the same empty, detached expression I'd seen in the mirror earlier that night, the same tired, blank stare I always wore after hours of solitude. But it felt wrong. It didn't look like me. It looked like something wearing my skin, mimicking me. I clicked the next camera feed, the one that covered the back entrance. It was static. The feed was just a swirling mess of black and white pixels. I hit the button again, harder this time, my fingers slipping. But nothing changed. No new footage. Just that same garbled mess. The man in the hallway turned and walked out of frame. I glanced over my shoulder at the small door behind me, the one that led to the hallway outside my booth. I hadn't heard anything. No footsteps, no knocks, no whispers. I hadn't heard the door open. But the man on the screen had walked straight out of my view and down that hall. I stood up. I shouldn't have. I should have waited, stayed by the booth, called for help, anything. But the curiosity, the sudden urge to know why, it was too much. My feet moved before I could stop them, my body reacting to a feeling I couldn't shake, the sense that something was wrong, terribly wrong. I walked to the door, my hand cold as I reached for the handle. My heart was pounding, each step heavier than the last. I pulled open the door slowly, the faint creak of hinges echoing in the stillness of the hallway. It was as dark as ever outside. The same dim light from the emergency bulbs flickered above, casting long shadows along the walls. I peered around the corner, expecting to see nothing. Of course. No one would be here. It was an old building. A broken security system. My mind playing tricks on me. But then, in the distance, I saw it. A figure at the far end of the hallway, just standing there. The same figure. The one from the camera. He stood still, staring at me, his face obscured by the darkness. But I could feel his gaze, feel it, like an invisible weight pressing against my chest. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel his eyes on me, and that was worse than if I could see them. I froze, suddenly unsure if I'd made the right choice by walking out here. The hallway felt longer now, stretching before me, endless. The shadows seemed deeper than they should have been, as if they were pooling, waiting for something. And then, as if it was a signal, the figure moved. He didn't walk, though. He glided. As if he didn't need to move his legs. As if the air itself was carrying him forward. "Hello," I whispered, my voice barely audible. My words felt fragile, as if the very air around me would shatter them. No response. The figure continued to glide toward me, the dim light from behind casting an eerie outline of his body. I could feel my breath catch in my throat. This isn't real. It couldn't be. I turned quickly and bolted back into the booth, slamming the door behind me. My hands were trembling as I clicked the cameras back on. The hallway feed was static again, the image was gone, like it had never been there. Like I was imagining things. But I wasn't. I couldn't have been. I saw him. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew I needed to leave. My hands fumbled for my phone, but it felt heavy in my grasp. I had to call someone. Anyone. I had to get out of here. But then, just as I was about to dial, I heard it. The softest click from the camera system. I turned to the monitor and felt the color drain from my face. The same figure, dressed in my uniform, stood in the exact spot I had just been sitting in, right in front of the security booth. I hadn't heard him walk in. I hadn't heard the door open. But there he was. And he was staring straight into the camera. Staring straight at me. The door behind me creaked open, slowly. Story 12. It was one of those late-night drives, the kind where the road stretches out before you like an endless ribbon of asphalt, and the world outside feels both familiar and foreign. The headlights of my car sliced through the darkness, illuminating nothing but the occasional passing sign or faded road marker. I had been driving for hours, the kind of drive that makes the mind wander, where the hum of the engine becomes a kind of lullaby. I'd been on this stretch of highway for a while, and the coffee I'd stopped for earlier was wearing off. The fatigue was starting to settle in, like a weight pressing against my eyelids. I needed a break. That's when I saw the sign for a rest stop. It was just up ahead, nestled off the side of the highway, a small, unassuming parking lot lit by flickering lamps. There was no one else around. It was almost too quiet, like the whole place had been abandoned. But I wasn't picky. I needed to stretch my legs, maybe grab a snack, and get my head on straight. I pulled into the lot, my tires crunching softly on the gravel. The glow of the streetlights cast long shadows over the rows of empty spaces. It looked like a typical rest stop, a few vending machines, a dimly lit restroom, and a long row of picnic tables, all neglected and forgotten under the weight of the night. I parked my car near the far end, far from any other vehicles. The air was cold, but not unbearable. I stepped out of the car, the cool breeze biting at my skin. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the stillness as I made my way toward the restroom. The dim light over the entrance buzzed faintly, casting an eerie yellow glow on the cracked pavement. As I walked inside, the restroom was surprisingly clean, almost pristine. I washed my hands and splashed cold water on my face, trying to shake off the exhaustion. When I looked up into the mirror, I saw the same tired reflection I'd been carrying for hours. My eyes were heavy, and my hair had begun to fall out of place, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. I turned to leave and stepped back into the parking lot, taking a deep breath of the cold air. That's when I noticed something strange. I was standing in the exact same spot I'd parked. I looked at my car, and it was still there, untouched, parked neatly in the lot. The rest stop was still empty. Still quiet. I felt a strange sense of déjà vu wash over me, but I shrugged it off. Maybe I hadn't walked far enough. Maybe I'd just gotten turned around. I decided to stretch my legs a bit more, maybe go for a walk around the lot to clear my head. So, I walked. I took the same path, passing the row of empty spaces again, the lonely vending machines, and the forgotten picnic tables. I kept my eyes on the ground, thinking about how long I still had to go before I reached my destination. When I finally reached the edge of the lot, I looked up, expecting to see the highway in front of me, the open road stretching on for miles. But instead, I saw the same parking lot. The same row of empty spaces. I frowned. It didn't make sense. I turned around, thinking I must have walked in a circle somehow, but the layout of the place was too simple for that. There was only one way in and out. I walked back toward the center of the lot, my shoes tapping quietly against the asphalt. And there it was again. My car, parked in the same spot, exactly where I had left it. I stopped. This wasn't right. I was sure of it now. I had walked around the lot. I should have been further down the road, at the entrance. But no, the parking lot was the same, the surroundings the same. I'd come back to the same place. I walked again, this time with more purpose. I followed the same path, around the vending machines, past the picnic tables, toward the road that should have led me out of this place. But just like before, I found myself back in the parking lot. I stood there for a long moment, my breath coming quicker now, my heart racing. This was impossible. There was only one entrance, one exit. How could I be back here again? I glanced up at the small sign by the restroom. It was the same. The same faded logo, the same cracked letters. Nothing had changed. I pulled out my keys and walked to my car, my hands shaking slightly. I'd been here too long. I was getting tired, but I needed to leave. I got in, started the engine, and drove out of the lot. The headlights lit up the road ahead, the same dark stretch of highway I had been driving on for hours. I felt a strange sense of relief, like I was finally escaping. But just as I was about to put the car in gear, I saw it. The rest stop. Again. It was impossible. I had just left it behind. There was no way I could be seeing it again so soon. The same flickering lights, the same row of empty spaces. The same damn parking lot. I slammed on the brakes, my heart thudding in my chest. I wasn't even sure how I had gotten back here. There was no exit in sight, no turnoff, no road that could have looped me back. It was like I hadn't even moved. The parking lot was still there, mocking me, glowing faintly in the distance. I turned the car around quickly, desperate to get away, but every turn I took, no matter which direction, led me right back to the same spot. I tried again. I drove in a straight line this time, hoping that I'd find an exit or maybe another road, anything that would let me leave this place. But I found nothing. Just the same parking lot, the same lonely sign, the same empty, forgotten tables. A wave of panic started to rise in my chest, but I tried to calm myself. There had to be some explanation. Maybe the rest stop was just in some kind of loop, some kind of optical illusion. Maybe I was just overtired. I'd been driving for too long. That had to be it. I got out of the car again. This time, I walked down the row of parking spots, trying to get a better sense of my surroundings. I walked past the vending machines, past the picnic tables. The air felt colder now, the shadows deeper. The quiet of the place seemed oppressive, like the walls of reality were closing in around me. But no matter which direction I went in, I always ended up back at the same spot. The same parking lot. The same empty spaces. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't leave. I wasn't even sure if I was still in the world I had come from anymore. The lights flickered again. The vending machines hummed softly. The parking lot was silent, except for the soft thrum of the air, like the breath of something far too large for the space it occupied. I turned around to face my car, but it wasn't there anymore. I blinked. The car wasn't in the lot. But the sign, the lights, the place, it was all the same. And I understood, then. It wasn't a rest stop. It wasn't a place you passed through. It was the place you stayed. Forever. Story 13. I didn't need a mirror. I wasn't one of those people who spent hours staring at myself, adjusting my hair, or analyzing my reflection. But when I walked into that thrift store, something about that old, tarnished mirror caught my eye. It was leaning against the back wall, its frame ornate and dark, the edges chipped and worn by years of neglect. The glass was faintly cloudy, but it had a certain charm to it, a kind of weathered elegance. I didn't really think much of it at first. It wasn't until I touched it, the cool surface beneath my fingertips, that I felt something. A little tug. Something beyond the surface of the glass. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I felt drawn to it in a way I couldn't explain. The store clerk was friendly enough, an older woman who barely looked up from her book when I made my way to the counter. I asked her about the mirror, and she just shrugged, mentioning that it had been sitting there for years, gathering dust. She said it was a good price, too good to resist, really. I didn't have any particular use for it, but the idea of taking something old, something with history, felt appealing. I could hang it in the hallway, maybe. Or the living room. Somewhere it could be admired, even if just for its vintage look. So, I bought it. The first few days were uneventful. I hung the mirror on the wall in the hallway, right by the front door. It was a strange spot for a mirror, I guess, but it fit there. The hallway itself was narrow and dimly lit, with just enough space for it to reflect the light from the living room. The mirror added an almost haunting, antique quality to the otherwise simple room. It wasn't until the third night that I noticed something strange. I was home alone, finishing up some work at my desk when I walked by the hallway. As usual, the mirror caught my eye. I stopped for a moment, glancing at my reflection in the dim light. But this time, something was different. It was subtle at first. The reflection wasn't quite right. I could see myself standing there, my face illuminated by the soft glow from the living room. But behind me, just beyond my shoulder, I saw a figure. A woman. She wasn't in the hallway. She was in the mirror. I blinked, the sight of her almost a blur in the glass. She stood there, still as a statue, her features obscured by shadows. But I could feel her presence, like she was waiting. Watching. The reflection of the hallway was empty, but the woman in the mirror was unmistakable. I stepped back, my heart racing a little. Maybe it was just the lighting playing tricks on me, I thought. Maybe I was seeing things. But the feeling of being watched lingered. I told myself it was nothing. Just a trick of the light. The next day, I made sure to keep myself busy. I avoided walking near the mirror, brushing off the strange feeling that had settled in my chest. But that night, when I passed by again, I saw her. She was still there, just behind me. The same figure, the same dark, shapeless outline. This time, I froze. The woman's presence felt real. My skin prickled as the air in the hallway seemed to grow colder. I took a step back, my breath shallow. I didn't want to look again. But I couldn't help it. I had to see. I had to know what was going on. I turned, slowly, to face the mirror directly. There she was, standing behind me in the glass, just a silhouette in the darkness, her features still unclear. Her eyes were too dark, too empty, like they were hollowed out, watching me without blinking. The chill on my skin grew more intense. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. "Hello," I whispered, unsure why I was even speaking. The woman didn't move. She didn't respond. She just stood there, still, as if waiting for something. I backed away, my mind racing. What was this? How was this happening? I left the house for a few hours, hoping that when I returned, everything would be normal again. The mirror would be just a mirror. But when I came home, I could feel it, that unsettling weight in the air. The feeling of being watched. And sure enough, when I passed by the hallway, there she was again, the woman in the reflection, standing behind me. I couldn't explain it. I was the only one in the house. No one else was there. Yet she was there, in the mirror, watching me. I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence, that I was tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But the woman was always there when I was alone. Always behind me in the reflection, never in the room with me. I tried moving the mirror, hoping to change the angle, change the way it reflected the space. But no matter where I put it, no matter how I rearranged the furniture, the woman remained. Standing there, in the glass. The most unsettling part. She never moved. Not once. She never spoke. She just stood behind me, watching, waiting. I couldn't keep living like this. The mirror had to go. I called a friend to help me take it down. We carried it to the car, both of us silent, as if we were afraid to speak too loudly in case it somehow hurt us. I told her I was taking it to the dump. I didn't want it anywhere near me. Not anymore. When we arrived, I found myself hesitating. I didn't want to let it go, but I didn't want to keep it, either. I felt like I was making a decision that could somehow change everything, but I didn't know how or why. But when I opened the trunk to place the mirror inside, I paused. There was a woman standing in the reflection. In the mirror. But I wasn't facing it. I could hear my friend calling my name from the front of the car, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. The woman in the mirror, the same one I had seen for days, was standing behind me, but I wasn't standing in front of the mirror. I turned around. My friend was still at the front of the car. She wasn't near me, not at all. And then, I understood. The mirror hadn't shown her when I was alone. It had shown her when she was standing right behind me. It had been her all along. When I looked back at the mirror, the glass was empty. And in the silence that followed, I couldn't help but wonder, was the woman in the reflection still there? Or had she finally stepped out? Story 14. The bell had just rung. I remember that moment clearly, even now. The rush of students, the noise of shoes slapping against the polished floors, the distant hum of lockers slamming shut. I was at my desk in the back of the classroom, trying to finish the last few lines of an essay before the bell rang, before the day officially ended. I didn't really care about the essay, or about the class for that matter. It was just one of those dreary afternoons, the kind where everything felt heavy, like the air itself was thick, hard to breathe. The hallways outside were loud, chaotic, just like every other day. The usual chatter. The usual clatter. The usual rush to get out and away from school. But then, the loudspeaker crackled. It was faint at first, like someone was trying to speak through static, but then the voice became clear. Lockdown. Lockdown. This is not a drill. All students and staff are to immediately enter lockdown mode. Close all doors, turn off lights, and remain silent. I repeat, this is not a drill. There was a moment of silence. A strange, hollow stillness fell over the room. No one moved at first. No one spoke. The seconds felt like minutes, stretching out, each one lingering in the air longer than it should have. Then, slowly, people started to react. Our teacher, Ms. Reynolds, jumped up from her desk, her face pale, her hands shaking. I remember the fear in her eyes. She didn't seem prepared, didn't seem sure of what was happening. She rushed to the door, locking it with a trembling hand. She turned off the lights and went to the windows, pulling the blinds down, one by one, until the room was shrouded in darkness. Outside, the hallway was quiet. But I could hear the sound of something in the distance, something faint but unmistakable, sirens. And then, the soft thud of footsteps. Not the usual shuffle of students leaving school. These were heavy. Measured. Purposeful. The silence inside the classroom grew thicker, suffocating. No one spoke. No one moved. The air felt too still, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. Anything. I sat at my desk, my back straight, my hands on my lap, trying to calm my nerves. It wasn't real, I told myself. It couldn't be. They had to be overreacting. It was some kind of mistake, a miscommunication. Nothing could be that serious. The idea that something was happening outside that was worth a lockdown just didn't make sense. But the second stretched on, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The sound of sirens, muffled through the walls, seemed to grow louder. More urgent. A few minutes passed. Then I heard something else. A soft scraping sound. It was distant at first, barely audible over the rush of blood in my ears, but then it came closer. I leaned toward the door, straining my ears, trying to make sense of it. There was something moving outside. Something slow. Something deliberate. I glanced around the room. Everyone was still, their faces drawn, eyes wide. Some were clutching their phones, others whispered in low tones. I could feel the tension, thick and suffocating, like the air in here was closing in on us. Ms. Reynolds, her back to us, stood at the windows, her face pressed against the blinds. I could see the way her shoulders were shaking, the way her hands clenched the edge of the desk, as if she was holding herself up. The scraping sound came closer. Closer. Someone across the room, a kid I didn't know very well, Eli, I think his name was, stood up abruptly. "What the hell is going on out there?" he whispered, but his voice was sharp, loud enough to make my heart jump. His eyes were wide, frantic. He moved toward the door, like he was about to open it. "Sit down." Ms. Reynolds hissed, her voice so low and urgent it sent a shiver through my spine. "Sit down, Eli. Don't you dare." But it was too late. The door handle turned. The sound of the lock clicked loudly in the dark silence, and the door creaked open just a few inches before slamming back with a force that made the walls shudder. Eli stumbled backward, eyes wide with terror. A voice, low and hoarse, drifted through the crack in the door. "Let me in. Please." The voice sounded wrong. Distorted. Like someone was trying to speak through a mask. But there was something worse about it. The pleading, the desperation, it felt too real. For a moment, we all just stared. No one moved. No one breathed. The footsteps in the hallway outside had stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse than the noise. The tension in the air was unbearable. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. My pulse was hammering in my ears, louder than the sirens outside. Who is it?" Ms. Reynolds whispered, her voice trembling. There was no answer. Just that same slow, steady scraping. Like something dragging across the floor. I don't know how long we stood there, frozen. Time didn't make sense anymore. It felt like an hour had passed in just a minute. The world outside seemed so far away, so distant, like we were trapped in some kind of nightmare that refused to end. Then the door handle rattled again. A soft scraping sound followed. "Let me in," the voice said again, but this time, it was closer. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Someone was standing right outside the door. Someone was trying to get in. Ms. Reynolds went pale, and for the first time, I saw the uncertainty in her eyes. She backed away from the door, her hands shaking as she fumbled for her phone. Her finger hovered over the screen, but she didn't press anything. The scraping sound grew louder. The lights flickered. Then, suddenly, everything went black. For a moment, there was pure, suffocating silence. Complete darkness. My eyes adjusted, but I couldn't see anything. I could hear breathing. Shallow, quick breaths from everyone in the room. I could hear my own heart, thudding in my chest, painfully loud. And then, the sound of a thud. Someone had dropped something outside the door. I jumped, the sound jolting me out of my stillness. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to get up, to run, or to stay hidden under the desk, hoping no one would find me. The lights flickered again, and the door slammed open, but there was nothing there. No footsteps. No sound of scraping. No voice. Just the emptiness of the hallway. Then, the loudspeaker crackled to life once more. All clear. Lockdown is lifted. All students may return to their classrooms. The voice was calm, too calm, and I felt my stomach twist in confusion. I didn't move at first. None of us did. We just stared at the door, waiting. But after a few long minutes, Ms. Reynolds slowly stepped forward, and we all followed, cautiously. She opened the door a crack, just enough to peek through. The hallway was empty. Still. Silent. But something was different. Something had changed. The air felt off. Heavy. The scraping sound was gone. But it left something behind. A faint, lingering feeling. Like we had just survived something, something we didn't understand. Something that didn't feel real. As I walked back to my next class, the halls were eerily quiet. No one was rushing. No one was talking. Everyone was just moving, slow and cautious, their eyes darting back and forth, as though waiting for something to happen. And me? I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe the lockdown had never been lifted at all. Because the thing I heard outside that door, it never left. Story 15. It started out like any other day, or at least, I thought it would. I woke up late, just like I always do on Sundays, and groggily rolled over to check my phone. The first thing I saw was a notification. A DM from a fan, of course. It was a message I received nearly every morning, a nice, polite message asking how my day was going, or what I was up to. I smiled, like I always did, and typed a quick reply. But this morning, there was something else. Something strange. I saw it while I was scrolling through my feed, looking for something to post. I noticed a profile I didn't recognize, one that was following me but had no posts and no followers. Just a name. A name that looked oddly familiar, like it was my name, but with one letter slightly off. The profile picture. A photo of me. A candid shot I didn't remember taking. I stared at it for a moment. The photo was one I'd posted weeks ago, my coffee cup in hand, a slice of toast beside me on the kitchen counter. It was nothing special. It wasn't even a good photo, but there it was, on someone else's profile, as though it had been taken moments ago. I thought I was seeing things at first. Maybe some weird glitch. So, I refreshed the page, but the profile was still there. Still the same. My name, my photo, but no posts, no followers, and no activity. I shook my head, trying to ignore it. Probably just a fan page or some automated bot, I thought. But the strange feeling didn't fade. Something about the whole thing made my skin crawl, like something wasn't quite right. That afternoon, I went to a cafe downtown. I posted a picture of my latte and a croissant on my story, the usual, Sundays are for coffee, vibe. It got the usual amount of likes and comments. Nothing unusual. But that night, when I went back to check my profile, I noticed something again. That same account, the one with my name, my photo, had posted the same picture I had just uploaded. The latte, the croissant, the exact same angle. The caption was slightly different, but it was my post, from my life, posted before I did it. I stared at the post for a long time. I thought maybe it was just another coincidence. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone wrong. That night, I posted a new video. I was showing off a new skincare routine I'd been trying. It had taken me hours to set up the lighting, and I'd filmed it a dozen times, perfecting each take. I was excited to share it, I knew it would get a good response from my followers. The next morning, I woke up to see something even worse. That same profile, the one with the slightly off name, the one that had been following me for days, had posted my video. The one I had filmed hours ago. Word for word, line for line. The same tutorial. The same products, the same lighting. Even the pauses between sentences, the way I smiled awkwardly at the camera. It was as though someone had been standing right next to me, watching me, recording everything I did, before I even did it. I had to look at the post again, my stomach turning. It wasn't just the content. It was the timestamp. The video had been posted hours before I recorded it. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't know what to do. I blocked the account. I reported it as a fake profile, a spam bot. But the next day, it was back. This time, it had posted about my plans. Plans I hadn't shared yet. I had been texting my friend about a party I was going to later in the week, but the message I sent her had only just gone through. I hadn't mentioned it online. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone else. Yet, when I checked the strange account again, there it was. A post about the party, the exact time and location, the dress I was planning to wear. I felt like I was losing my mind. I didn't share any more details about my life online after that. No plans. No photos. No updates. I kept my accounts locked down, only posting vague, pre-scheduled content. But that didn't stop it. It started getting worse. The posts weren't just content anymore. It was like the account knew my life, knew my every move. It posted about the food I ate, the places I went, the things I bought. Every time I did something, the account did it first. And it wasn't just the content anymore. The captions were eerily personal. They knew the way I felt. They knew the thoughts that ran through my head. The caption would say things like, "She's feeling overwhelmed today, but she's going to push through," right before I posted a photo of myself, looking tired and stressed. Trying to relax with some tea, but she's too anxious to really enjoy it, when I shared a simple photo of my cup of chamomile. I wasn't just being copied. I was being watched. Then came the night I'll never forget. I was sitting at home, trying to unwind after a long day. I opened my phone to scroll through social media, and saw that familiar profile again, the one with my name. This time, it had posted a video of me. But it wasn't something I had filmed. It wasn't a repost. It was a video of me, sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, looking exactly as I had been just a few minutes ago. It was as though someone had been standing in the doorway, recording me without my knowledge. My heart pounded in my chest. I hadn't filmed anything. I hadn't shared anything yet. I looked around my apartment, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. The door was locked. The windows were shut. But the feeling, the creeping sensation, was unbearable. I felt like I was being watched, not through a phone screen, but from somewhere far closer. I opened the profile again, my hands shaking. The video had a caption, "She'll be posting this soon. She won't even realize it's already been shared." I couldn't breathe. It was like I was being stalked by a digital version of myself, a version that always knew what I was going to do, what I was going to say. A version that moved faster, more efficiently, and better than I ever could. I deleted the account. Blocked it. Reported it again and again. I even contacted Instagram's support team. But it kept coming back, posting faster than I could respond. The posts got more invasive. More personal. It started sharing things I hadn't even thought of yet, showing moments I hadn't lived yet. I began to lose track of time, of reality. Was I living in the present? Or was I just replaying something that had already happened? I still don't know how it happened. How it knew. But sometimes, when I'm scrolling through my feed, late at night, when I can't sleep, I'll see a new post. One I haven't made yet. One I don't even remember thinking about. And I wonder if it's me posting it, or if it's the version of me that's always one step ahead.